Sometimes you get into the big topics, the big, complicated, somewhat scary topics, and you need a little bit of help so you don't look dumb. That's what we're going to do today. Try to prevent me from looking dumb. A few weeks ago, I made a three-part video series about the death of the dollar, and I think that there are some important points in those videos. I will get them linked up in the description, but to just sum them up in a few seconds, I was showing why the most feasible trajectory for the dominance of the dollar is a drawn-out decline rather than some kind of quick collapse. Some kind of quick collapse with a ready replacement, as a lot of others are suggesting. Now, to me, this is the most important topic as it relates to the price of gold and silver for two reasons. First of all, because it would have a direct impact on the price of the metals themselves. And then second, because it affects the way of life that you're trying to maintain by buying these alternative assets to begin with. So this is a big topic. It's a complicated topic, and it's one that I'm always interested in hearing from others on, especially if they're reasonable adults, not trying to beat the fear drum for views. So I have a take from Lior Gantz today. He's been on the channel before. I'm sure you've seen him. Now, usually we talk about near-term gold price trends, and we did talk about that, but really I skipped over that for this video, cut it out. I wanted to get into the bigger picture with Lior. So that's what this is about. The future outlook for the US dollar, and then how that will affect the price of gold and silver. I think you're going to find this one interesting. We're just going to jump right in. Lior, how are you?
How you doing?
Fantastic. I'm doing really well. I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to wind this one up for the viewers. So what do you say we just kind of jump in to the outlook for the dollar, maybe the role of the US in the global economy, and then how that all factors into gold and silver moving forward.
Right before your show, I created an exclusive report just for your viewers has not been published anywhere else yet. And it's at wealthresearchgroup.com/USA. And in that report, I detail how much the United States has pulled out of being the policeman in the Middle East, the arbiter of peace and democracy, the broker of deals between countries, and the protector of countries that are allies. And that vacuum, that power vacuum that's been created, has not been there where a Western country has not been the dominant country in the Middle East. We haven't seen that since the Brits. So for over 100 years, since 1918, when the Brits won World War I and came into the Middle East as victors, along with France, we have not seen a Middle East where the Western dominant is pulling out, because it was all about oil, access to the Suez Canal, access to the Mediterranean as a way to go through to India, and then later on with all the oil with the Saudis. So the petrodollar system is really collapsing right now. And it's interesting to see what is happening in the Middle East at the aftermath of that. If you remember the attacks on Aramco and their oil facilities, if you would have done that, if Iran would have done that in 2001, 2, 3, that would have been a full-blown American invasion. The Americans didn't take any action around that. And I can go on and on. Basically, you have a nuclear power right now in the Middle East with Iran. It's within weeks of announcing that it has uranium, enriched uranium, and that it's able to start to produce nuclear arsenals. And now you have a power in the Middle East that has nuclear power, apart from the one that everyone knows has one, but hasn't fully discussed it. So I think that what you would expect is regional wars, but there are none. There is normalization. There is a relaxation of tensions. There is a new power broker, with China brokering a deal between the Saudis and the Iranians, two arch rivals. You have Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria, a country that has suffered sanctions, the worst sanctions of the United States for years, and still those sanctions have not worked. He is in power. He will stay in power. He was just invited to the Arab League. So what you have is a situation where America is pulling out, and all these nations that have either been the allies of the United States or the victims of American policy are coming together and saying, hey, we're looking behind. We don't see any Biden and we don't see any American flag. They're out of Afghanistan. They're surely not helping when we needed them with this and that. They're not. That's not their focus. They've moved to the South China Sea. They haven't done that physically yet. There's still presence, but it's such a different world here in the Middle East, and I am in the Middle East, so I can tell you from first level experience. And that relaxation is 100%, 180-degree contrast to the Arab Spring of 2011. All of these problems that we've had here, with Yemen being now the worst country in the world to live in, with Syria and everything that's happened there, with all the conflicts. Now it's really relaxed. It's a relaxation and loosening of tensions. And I think that is critical for any American to understand, because that makes the dollar less relevant. When these countries figure out that they don't need the United States to survive, when their leaders understand that they can form their own foreign policies, and that they can protect themselves either by using China or Russia, then I think that you will start to see more and more the importance of the dollar waning. And that's why I think that we are really heading into a bear market for the dollar. And in the meantime, because it's been weaponized for sanctions in Syria and in Iran and in Russia, the central banks are turning to gold. If you look at who's buying gold, it's not traders, it's central banks. We're so early in this bull market because the retail is just not there. So in that report, I go into depth more about what's happening here. But so wealthresearchgroup.com/USA for that. But
a couple things that stand out to me. First, I didn't hear you mention the Belt and Road Initiative. China's push into a lot of countries developing and otherwise. They're actually making a lot of investments in the Middle East also. I wonder, as you're looking at this and you're talking about the relaxation of maybe the geopolitical issues, conflicts, regional conflicts, is there also a stronger reliance on China, or do you think that this is happening kind of independently?
100%. As I said, the Saudis and the Iranians, arch rivals, have signed normalization agreements brokered by China.
Yeah, China brought them together.
Correct. Russia has deep presence in Syria. So the fact that Bashar al-Assad has stayed in power and has been invited to the Arab League conference hosted by MBS or Mohammed bin Salman, shows you that they have capitulated, and now they want him to understand that, hey, if you're already staying, courtesy of Russia, then we have terms, and here's what we want you to do, the Arab countries, and in exchange, we will help you. So I think the next phase here is that the rich countries, the Emirates, will offer a lot of financial aid and humanitarian aid to the Syrians in exchange for helping them get a lot of their refugees that have gone on to other countries and have not been able to adapt to different cultures to come back to Syria. I think that Syria right now is like a narco state in the Middle East. I don't know if most people know this, but just Google it, and you will see that they've gone off to become a narco state. So these other countries in the Middle East don't like that at all. So we shall see what happens there. But for sure, this is all brokered by China and Russia as important factor because the Saudis, which are the center of the Arab world and the richest of all of them, they have never relied on their own military. They have a great military, but they've never relied on it. They had the Brits, then the Americans, and now they're just saying, okay, if the Americans can't do it, then we need the Chinese. So that's what's happening there. And I think that Turkey and what just happened there with Erdogan winning the elections again, that means that Russia will have a foothold there, and Turkey is the natural biggest leader in that region. It's a country that sits half in Asia, half in Europe, and speaks Arabic. It obviously has been a huge empire for 500 years until their decline. So they have a lot to win here, and that's where I think the Belt and Road Initiative comes in and everything else. The United States has shifted focus. They are much more inclined and are much more incentivized by selling, by doing what they did in the early years of World War II, selling weaponry, exporting oil, natural gas, basically profiteering from conflicts at in the rest of the world, while they intervene less and just profit more from the business that conflict and this reset brings, and then focusing along with Japan and their other allies at the chain of islands surrounding the South China Sea on China. I think that's going to be their biggest focus and will continue to be, especially as we move all of the supply chains out of China and into Mexico and Latin America.
Sure. Let me ask you a couple more questions, kind of they go different directions. On the Belt and Road Initiative, first off, there's a lot of stories on those investments going south, like they're not working out. China has a lot, maybe potentially even got overextended with a lot of their loans in some of the poorer nations. Do you think that the Chinese economic issues right now are material? You think that's going to be a big problem for them to continue? How do you think that plays in?
I do. I think that as much as Americans love to hate on America, be critical of American politics and everything, the Chinese are in deep trouble. They've created a system where they have no future legacy of leadership. It's so concentrated at the top that it's hard to see how the system really goes on. And then you couple that with their dreadful demographics. They are a country that cannot produce more than one children a family, more than one child a family as a culture, because for so many years, for 30 years, they've done 336 million abortions. You can't convince a couple to have children now. The government is doing everything. They're telling you, hey, we'll pay your mortgages. We'll give you a year off from work. It's just so embedded in the culture. And so China is going to be the first country in the world to lose about 40% of their population in the next 100 years without any major natural catastrophe doing it. It's not a famine or a drought or anything. It's just demographic trends. And when you take a country like that, that's going from 1.3 million to around 700 million, you're talking about a country that's their tax base is getting lost. So they will face a lot of issues and a lot of problems. I think that it's not dire, imminent. Tomorrow China's ending, but the almost blind conventional wisdom that says, "Hey, China's going to rule the 21st century." I think that it's overhyped at this point. It's clear that they will not. It's clear that it will be China and their bloc, Americans and their bloc, and the question is just how will these blocs get along? And that's why I keep saying that the dollar will not lose its reserve currency status, but it may have a secondary reserve currency to play with a either a fixed or a free conversion rate, and you will have countries that are more aligned with China and more aligned with the United States. And then you have other great powers that will tilt the balance, like India and Turkey. Indonesia is going to be an important one, and countries that are developing, like Brazil, and then the African countries, which are growing faster than any other demographics, and they're super young. They're going to bypass the entire industrial revolution right into 5G and micro banking, and it's very exciting, actually.
Let's come back to China just for a moment, because
Please.
very near term, we've got the conflict in Eastern Europe. So you've got potentially what you'd call a proxy war going on between NATO, which is effectively, driven by US at the moment, and then you've got China, who is potentially on, so it's not necessarily conflict between Russia and Ukraine as much as it's a potential proxy conflict between the United States and China. I guess that's how you'd look at it in terms of influence. And so I wonder, and maybe you don't agree with that, but let's just assume that part for a moment. So if we go down the road a little bit with the conflict ending, if China does what they did, bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia to the table, they bring Ukraine and Russia to the table, broker a peace deal, China comes out looking pretty good. What do you see that kind of thing happening, and do you see any kind of implication in the shorter term on that relevancy of the US dollar being affected by what might potentially come out of this conflict in Eastern Europe?
So, complex question, but the answer is that the war right now is in such a standstill, that and America is not going to be the one brokering this, because what America wants is for Putin to step down as president, and for his troops to withdraw completely, for all the refugees to come home, for there to be war reparations. Like they want full on Russia, you lost, sign the papers that you lost, you're not going to be the same. They really want to see this regime ending. On the flip side, China, it's not like it's buddy buddy with Putin. It's maybe portrayed that way in Western media, but it's certainly not the case. Putin not only didn't tell the Chinese that he's invading Ukraine, but he also played him for a fool and waited for the Olympics to end. It was a whole problem. Now, another thing that plays against China here is that Russia is showing that invading another country is not that easy, and that has actually lessened the leverage that China has over Taiwan. So it hasn't done it any favors. Before this war, half of the world thought that if China were to invade Taiwan, it would take him 5 days and done. They can do it. It's feasible. Today, war strategists think it's impossible. Even Chinese war strategists think that it would be suicidal to try and conquer by military means Taiwan. So this war is not going in a way that China likes it, and I'm sure they're driving for their own purposes. They want to see a truce. They want to see some sort of a resolution. The problem for the Russians is that they are in a situation where if Putin isn't removed from within, then this war can just last for a very long time, because they haven't won any of their major objectives, and I'm sure that they have bigger plans, and yeah, I just think it's a really problematic situation, and one where the United States cannot broker it. It just has unrealistic aims, and where the Chinese, they're the ones that can broker it, but they will not be brokering it towards Putin, as everyone thinks. They would rather just put an end to it. The worst thing that can happen, actually, is that the Ukrainians advance, not because I'm pro-Russia, but because if the Ukrainians start to advance and actually enter Russian territory, I think that uh, they might be nuked with tactical bombs by Putin, because at that stage he will feel like that's his last resort. Peace negotiations commence. Hit that point of maximum pain for everyone else.
This is on a Tuesday, and we just saw 8 drones into Russia today, this morning.
Yeah, yeah.
5 shot down, 3 redirected. Yeah, so it's escalating, and
it's
in a
escalating.
good way.
Where we are right now is that if left alone, this war can go on for 15, 20 years. And so what's happening is, because of NATO training and because of all the military might that is effectively rearming the Ukrainian army, it's very hard to see the Russians prevail at this point. They have a lot of problems.
Yeah, okay, so we've been talking about China, Russia, Turkey. Who else in there? We talked about Africa. A lot of these nations are known, their central banks right now are buying gold. Through the conflicts, through just the initiatives and all the things that are going on right now, and the potential issue where the US dollar is less relevant. What happens to gold? Is there a direct implication or not?
Absolutely. Gold is looking really good, to be honest. So I think that if you consider everything that's happening right now in the economy, the fact that we have the Fed about to raise interest rates again on June 15th to 5.25, unheard of, just unheard of. These are very high interest rates. And when the Fed is forced to cut them, and will, I think that it will in Q1 of 2024, then the entire flow of funds away from the dollar and into the emerging sectors, into Europe, into Asia, is going to be incredible, because you have a situation where in the United States, everything that has worked for the US dollar for the last 10 years is in a bear market. Big tech in zero interest rates, which pulled money and attracted money into Silicon Valley and drove a lot of demand for the US dollar, on top of the fact that the Middle East was in shambles and America was an important dominant factor for all these countries that were looking for help. The fact that you have now de-escalation in the Middle East, where they don't need the dollar anymore, where they saw that sanctions have failed with Syria, and that weaponizing the dollar can be something that they experienced. Who knows which country is next on America's sanctions list? Those are all big factors for gold. And then when you look at persistent inflation, that is the major factor for gold. We have not had persistent inflation in on a global basis for 50 years. And we have to understand that that is the most detrimental part of the dollar bear market. So between that and between the fact that I think that the next elections will be fought about fiscal responsibility and who's able to promise restoring some financial order in the United States, those are all key messaging for, hey, we have to inflate the debt. And inflating the debt is just not, it's not the right recipe for a dollar bull market. So I do think that the dollar is entering a multi-year bear market, and the first level to watch is the 100 on the DXY 100, and the major level to watch is the 90. If it breaches below 90, if it breaks down below 90, man, that's when you can see silver heading to all-time highs.
You just said silver.
Yeah, look, gold is going to be at an all-time high very soon. So I'm not even talking about gold. Gold is within spitting distance of an all-time high. I think that once the market is convinced that the Fed has stopped raising, and that it's either pausing or about to cut, gold will be in an all-time high. Silver is the one that's half of its all-time high. So I think that it's more interesting because the dollar can rally with gold and silver cannot. Silver does not rally the dollar strong. So you need a bear market and you shall have it.
Hmm. All right, that's kind of a foreboding. And you shall own nothing and you will be happy.
Okay. Well, you should own silver and then you'd be happy.
Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot to that Belt and Road Initiative and just the political influence of China. But at the same time, their economy's got some serious trouble. So on one
It's
hand,
not
it
only
looks
that.
like strategically they're genius, and then on the other hand, it looks like
The Chinese don't have a free currency. Their currency has never been allowed to trade freely. So you don't even know what their currency is worth.
it's worth what they say it's worth.
Exactly. So you can't have a reserve currency,
Right.
meaning a currency that's with the rule of law and that is free trading, and it's just not even remotely interesting as a reserve currency. Nobody trusts the Chinese. Nobody trusts the Chinese.
Government. Nobody trusts the Chinese government. I think that part's obviously implied, but I think that's a good place to stop. Let us know what you think. I would love to see your take on the topic. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button. It's a huge help for the channel. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.